the Peacemaker Season 2 finale is released, it's time for me to give y'all my review on the entire season. And this is your spoiler warning if you've not watched Peacemaker Season 2 and you still intend on watching it. And starting out, I'm going to give y'all my positives. And that's that I pretty much enjoyed every episode of this season except the finale. I would give a positive score to episodes 1 through 7 if I did review it weekly, with episode 6 and episode 7 being my standout favorites. Where in episode 6, we got that really good reveal that it was Earth X that Chris had been spending all his time on. And in episode 7, we got basically the payoff to that, and I feel like that should have been the season finale, to be honest. And episode 7 showcased John Cena's best acting I have seen in his entire career by far, with that blood-curdling scream he let out whenever they were all dogpiling on Keith. Just a fantastic performance from John Cena, and he also gave a lot of great performances in the other episodes of the season as well. Also in episode 6 and 7, Jennifer Holland gives some really good acting, especially in that interrogation room scene in episode 6. That scene in particular is probably in contention for one of my favorite scenes of the entire show. Just the dialogue and the acting was just firing on all cylinders right there. And another positive I'm going to give Peacemaker Season 2 is going to be the story. And there are some things that I feel positive on in the story, which I'm about to talk about in a second, and there's some stuff that are going to be in my mixed section of the review as well. But the things that I liked about the story in this season were the emotional beats between the characters. And you could tell James Gunn really does care about these characters in the show, because even in the finale, as much as I dislike some of the greater universe setup stuff, he did nail a lot of the emotional beats in my opinion. And just to reiterate that point, I do mean a lot of them and not all of the emotional beats. Another thing I liked about this season is the action, while scarce, was pretty good when it did pop up. There was that bar fight with Emilia Harcourt in episode 1 or 2, I can't remember, but that fight was really cool. And in episode 3 where Peacemaker takes out all of the Sons of Liberty, even though we find out later that he took out freedom fighters. and the action itself in that scene was good though. Also, I can't forget when Rick Flag Sr. just beats the absolute shit out of Chris Smith, especially this knee kick specifically. When I was watching that episode, I rewound that kick like 3 times just to see it again. Another positive that's going to get talked about again in my mixed section of the review is going to be the soundtrack, because a lot of the songs that James Gunn did curate for this season had a really nice vibe to it and it fit the story, and a lot of them are in my playlist now, with the standout song in my opinion being the intro song Oh Lord by Foxy Shazam, because I do think that that song specifically just fits the entire story so well, and I don't think he could have picked a better song for this season. And I really wasn't vibing with the new intro at first, but then the more times it played, the more I started to love it. But I still do think overall the intro for season 1 is the better one, but I like the song in season 2's intro better. I also thought the CGI and practical effects were pretty well done in this season. There were a lot of deaths in this season where the practical effects were utilized very well, especially with the alternate universe Chris getting killed, where they made like a replica of John Cena's head and he like posed with it on Instagram or something. The last thing I really liked about Peacemaker Season 2 is the emotional value, because like I said earlier, James Gunn did do a good job of hitting a lot of the emotional beats pretty well, and I was basically feeling all of them up until the finale. Now to talk about the things that I'm mixed on in Peacemaker Season 2, with the first thing being the story structure of this season, because while I do like the character writing in this season and the personal moments that each character have with one another, I was not a fan of how the bigger plot points were handled. Like the whole Earth X thing we built up to for like 6 episodes, and we didn't get the reveal for it until the end of episode 6. And at that point, we have 2 episodes left. We wrap up that whole storyline in 1 episode in episode 7. Then all of the Rick Flag stuff that we touched upon earlier in like episode 4 or 5 get brought back into episode 8, where we just speed run through all these plot points in the finale episode just to get to the greater DCU setup at the end. And I would have just preferred if we got an extra episode to flesh this out, or if James Gunn had not spent so much time with Argus agents going to his house constantly in 4 episodes. I don't know, I just really didn't like the way that was structured, and I think if we just condensed the first half of the season into like 2 or 3 episodes, and then flesh out all the stuff in the last 3 episodes and gave that maybe 4 or 5, this could have been a really good season of television. I also want to mention that the ending of the story does feel awkward too, because we aren't getting a season 3 of Peacemaker, at least not in the near future. And James Gunn said that this is mainly set up for the greater DCU and Man of Tomorrow, which I think is weird to set up your PG-13 Man of Tomorrow movie with Superman that was also a PG-13 movie in this niche R-rated show about an F-list character, and you're trying to pull families for Man of Tomorrow. So I'm really hoping that he does explain everything in Man of Tomorrow, which he did say after the finale aired that Man of Tomorrow will explain everything that you need to know. But I still think it's a valid concern to have. And the next thing that I feel mixed on in this season is the soundtrack, because I did mention earlier that I have a lot of songs that I've added to my playlist from this season that fit fit the story very well. But man, in that finale episode, the whole episode just turned into a music video and it was just getting nauseating. And that's never been something that bothered me personally about James Gunn's projects. But I do know people personally that get really bothered by the needle drop kind of cliche thing that he does. So if I know people personally that are more bothered by it, and this episode specifically bothered me, I know they were pissed watching the finale. Like, he plays out that cliche so much in the Peacemaker season 2 finale that it literally breaks out into concert. That really did feel like a fourth wall break, to be honest. And if you look in the back, James Gunn is in the scene. And the last thing that I wasn't really sure about this season is some of the characters, specifically Vigilante and Economos, because there was this whole bit during the season of Vigilante being like super mean to his mom, and those scenes made me like physically uncomfortable. And on top of that, I just didn't find that whole bit very funny, to the point in the finale where like I just wanted to skip through it. And for Economos, I just felt like he was poorly written this season, to the point where as soon as he was captured in episode 6, I get that he's a coward, but he just started spewing so much exposition to alternate Earth Augie, and I think that added to that feeling that I had about speedrunning plot points towards the end of the season. And moving on to my negative section of the review, and my first negative is going to be the season finale, because it did sour me on this season a little bit, because I'm the type of guy that likes to have good endings to the stuff that I watch. I could like a movie straight up 95% of the way through, but if it has a really bad ending, the score for me can drop dramatically because of that. And that's how I feel about this season, because I liked pretty much 80 to 90% of the season, but the finale dropped the ball for me, and now I want to give this a lower rating than I would have if it stuck the landing. And that leads into my next negative being rewatchability, because I'm just not going to rewatch this season unless we get a season 3 of Peacemaker in like 2 or 3 years. And I've just completely forgot about most of the stuff in this, which I don't consider that to be a genuine rewatch of like rewatching it in my free time. It's more just for this channel. And my last negative is going to be the setup for the grander DCU. And I did mention most of my points on that earlier, how I feel about setting that up in this project specifically. But I also just don't like the way it was handled in general, of it just feeling tacked on towards the end, almost like a post-credit scene. And for it to be the end of the season, just to be a cliffhanger and not have a season 3 announced, just feels weird too. It's just that whole setup felt so awkward. And I feel like it did expose a lot of flaws that James Gunn might have in the future when it comes to trying to be Kevin Feige and set up these grander universe things. And I could be being dramatic right now, but it is something that is going to be concerned with me going into Lanterns, which also is going to have a grander DCU connection. But that project isn't directed by Gunn, so we'll see. Overall though, I think Peacemaker season 2 was a solid season of TV, but it could have been great or amazing. And it kind of did drop my hype a little bit for the future of the DCU, but at the same time, I'm also really hyped for next year's project, because we're getting a whole year of DCU projects that are not directed or written by James Gunn. So we could get a well-needed break from the guy before Man of Tomorrow comes out in 2027. But this is my Peacemaker season 2 scorecard. Y'all let me know what y'all thought of Peacemaker season 2 in the comments, and make sure to follow for more DCU content just like this.